Clothing can tell so much about a person. For example, it could tell you what magic school they're associated with. It could identify if somebody is rich and wears fabrics not available to the common man, fabrics that can only be bought at great expense, or in the modern day and age at your local fabric store if you know that you're looking for brocade. It could identify the stranger in the cloak as a government employee, or as a dire necromancer wielding the powers over life and death. Yep. Clothing sure does tell us a lot about people we see. And yet, so often, a description in a book or in a role-playing game will say, he wore a doublet and hose. Or maybe you don't even get that. Maybe you don't get any description of what the character is wearing. So today, let's talk a little bit about using clothing in your fantasy world, describing what characters wear and why it matters. Welcome to another episode of Just in Time Worlds with your host, Marie Mullaney. If you have not yet done so, please do hit the subscribe button down below. And if you have Discord and are interested in joining my community of world builders, the link to that is down below as well. Okay, let's get cracking. So first, you must understand that clothing means more than just what the character is wearing. What somebody wears in a fantasy world can be an expression of how much wealth they have. In fact, it was one of the primary flexes of wealth during the medieval period, and even today we see it in the rich and famous with their douar dresses and the hats and the weirdness that they wear. The fact that they can afford this clothing is a show of power. And the same applies to wealthy individuals in your world, or people who are attempting to be wealthy but don't necessarily have that kind of money. How do they sneak around the problem of wealth? This was very well done in Jacqueline Carey's Cashil's Chosen, when Phaedra returns to the royal court and she doesn't have sufficient funds to pay for a dress of the kind of caliber that she needs to make her debut at the royal court. And there's a whole series of events around how she gets that kind of money and things she has to do, like making do with getting ready for the event by using her own people to do her hair and so on, rather than going out and having that done. Now, of course, the Cashil books do have a heavy focus on that kind of detail. You don't have to go into all of that detail, but if you are indicating that a character is rich, give them a rich description. Talk about the fabric that they wear. Are they wearing cambric, brocade, lace? Do they have full skirts? Do they have simple, elegant sleeves? Do their sleeves run all the way down to their feet? Remember, things like a long train is actually indicative of somebody who has enough wealth to pay for a servant to carry the train. So if your women are walking around with a long train on their dress, it is likely an indicator that they are wealthy. It is a flex of wealth. Besides wealth, clothing can also be used to indicate an organization that the person belongs to. It can have symbology built into it. In my world, I created the noble sash, which my characters wear from their right shoulder across their body, and it has the badges of their family worked into it. So you can tell by reading a noble sash what family he belongs to, which duchy he comes from, what his magical prowess is. If one of his tassels are red, then that means that he has passed the Dusang trials and is capable of that level of magic. And on the topic of showing rank with clothing, don't forget about the accessories. The Roman Catholic Church used rings to indicate your bishopric rank. You can do the same kind of thing with any noble ranks. You can have certain colors of stones reserved for certain ranks within an organization, or perhaps a specific type of jewelry, bracelets and neckband. Torques were very popular in the Celtic period to indicate your nobility, and they would run around your neck and be clasped here. If you have such an item of clothing or an accessory that expresses who a person is and what they belong to, don't forget to think about what kind of expressions that would give rise to in your world. For example, in my world, I speak about somebody living behind the sash, meaning they're noble. I speak about the rechtsprekers, the law, walking the line on the sash, which is to say that they can prosecute nobles. I speak about somebody growing up behind somebody's sash, meaning they have been fostered to that family. And these in-world expressions really enhance and enrich the experience that people have of your world. So when you're designing clothing for your world or accessories for your world, don't just think about what they mean. Think about how people in your world interact with that piece of clothing. Now, designing clothing is one thing. Describing it can be something else. And when you're describing clothing, do remember that if you sound like a fashion reporter, your readers will think that you are a fashion reporter. So don't just tell me the sleeves were long and dripping. Tell me what it means. Tell me that the character experienced an emotion that sent a shiver down their arms, that let their sleeves tremble where they dripped to the bottom of the hem, a moment of emotional impact described in how the clothing moves. And don't just give me one outfit of the character. As the character changes and grows, let me see that in the clothing that they wear. Do they change? And instead of wearing pants, they now continually wear dresses? Or do they change from wearing rich, wealthy clothing to wearing more practical clothing? Or do they become a hardcore assassin and put on assassin's clothing rather than wearing the garb of nobility? And that is my thoughts on using clothing in a fantasy world. Do check out any of my other videos around me. And if you'd like to support me in making more of these videos, check out my Ko-fi page or buy my book. Links to both down below.